My custom-built scanner caught some gems going into next week. A few runners to watch closely, and a couple tickers that may be heading towards the end of their respective runs. Hey traders, welcome to Totally Invest. Let's get into it. This scan ran through over 2,000 tickers and came back with more than 1,300 long setups and over 400 short setups, so there is plenty to work through today. I will cover some of the top picks to keep an eye on for next week. Remember, nothing here is financial advice. Do your own research and manage risk according to your own individual risk profile. Macro has a mild risk-on lean right now, which sets a generally constructive tone for continuation setup. The broader market fear and greed reading is balanced, with greed names slightly outnumbering fear names, so neither bulls nor bears have a clean edge at the index level. That balance is actually a useful backdrop for the reversal and dip watch names we will get to later. Kicking things off with the episodic pivots, which are names where a big catalyst gap already happened, and now we are watching how the stock drifts to see if institutions and retail buyers are holding their shares and possibly adding on either dips or continued strength. First up is BFLY Network, and this one just fired, so pump the brakes before you do anything with it. The stock gapped up 56% on 9 times normal volume after a news story connecting it to AI applications, which is a genuinely massive spark, but the drift is sitting at 0 days and the range and volume have yet to tighten, which means this setup has not proven anything yet. The scanner is putting this on the watch list only, not flagging it as an entry. Next week, an intraday confirmation like an opening range breakout may be worth considering, not chasing the open. Next is ARQQ, which gapped up 32% on 5 times normal volume on the back of a quantum computing sector story. This one is 3 days into its drift, which is better, but the range is still not tightening and volume is not yet declining in a convincing way. The structure is not clean enough for the scanner to call it premium yet. What would make it clean is another few days of range compression with volume fading toward the low end, and once those two things line up, the drift high becomes the level worth watching. Payoneer Global is the standout in this EP group because the setup is actually clean. The stock sparked 24% on over 11 times normal volume, and it has been drifting for 7 days now with the range tightening and volume declining, which is exactly what you want to see after a catalyst event. The scanner is calling this premium quality, which means supply has dried up and the name is coiling after the initial move. The setup would call for watching a break above the drift high as the trigger for the secondary expansion leg, and that is the kind of EP that can produce outsized follow-through. Now for the top 5 momentum picks. These are names with bullish alignment on both the daily and weekly from the scanner, confirmed by a custom-built ticker-by-ticker fear and greed sentiment. Every single one of them carries the extended flag this week, so the framing is different than usual. Micron Technology is sitting in extreme greed on its own sentiment read, and the trend is genuinely strong with a rising ADX that shows this is not a weak trend. However, the stock is deeply stretched above its weekly 9 EMA, which is the scanner's warning that chasing here could be a mistake. Anyone already holding this one, the scanner suggests trailing stops rather than adding size, and the setup would call for waiting on a pullback toward that rising weekly 9 EMA before considering fresh exposure. The flow signal is early stage, which is worth noting as a potential longer runway, but the extension is real. Vishay Intertechnology is the most extended name in the entire momentum list, sitting even further above its weekly 9 EMA than Micron, with a rising ADX that confirms the trend has real institutional power behind it. The stock's own sentiment is in extreme greed, meaning the crowd is fully leaning one way, and that combination of extension plus crowd positioning is exactly where the scanner shifts to a protect and scale tone. If you are already in this one, the scanner thinks tightening stops is the move, and new entries here carry meaningful mean reversion risk given how stretched the price is from the weekly mean. AMKR Technology just printed a fresh signal, bar 1, with both daily and weekly aligned bullishly in a rising ADX showing the trend is building momentum. The stock's own sentiment sits in greed, but not yet extreme greed, which is a slightly cleaner backdrop than the top 2 names. That said, it is still meaningfully extended above the weekly 9 EMA. So the scanner is not waving anyone in here aggressively. The fresh signal is worth watching closely because if the stock can pull back toward the weekly mean without breaking the trend structure, the setup becomes much more interesting. Citigroup is the most measured extension in this group, sitting just modestly above the weekly 9 EMA compared to the semiconductor names, and it just printed a second bar signal, which means the weekly trend flip is still fresh. The ADX is rising but at a lower level than the others, which suggests the trend is earlier in its development and potentially has more runway ahead. Sentiment on this name sits in greed, so the crowd is leaning bullish but not at a fever pitch. The scanner flags this as one to watch on any intraday weakness for a cleaner entry than the others, given the relatively shallower extension. Global Foundries rounds out the momentum list with its own sentiment deep in extreme greed, and the trend confirmed on both timeframes with a strong rising ADX. The extension above the weekly 9 EMA is real and meaningful here, which puts this squarely in the same protect and scale bucket as the rest of the list. The flow signal is early stage, which is interesting from a longer term perspective, but the entry risk for someone coming in fresh at current levels is elevated. The scanner suggests a smarter approach is watching for the weekly mean to catch up to price rather than chasing what is already a crowded name. These next three names are in uptrends on the weekly. This is not a breakdown situation, but the daily has cooled off and the scanner is watching for the pullback entry. These are potential buy the dip names. Unusual Machines has the weekly trend fully intact with the weekly 9 EMA well below current price. And the daily sentiment has cooled off noticeably relative to the weekly read. The stock is holding near the daily 9 EMA, which is a shallow first test of support, and falling volume on this pullback would be the healthy confirmation that sellers are not in control. DELL Technologies is showing the deepest cooling in this group between the daily and weekly sentiment readings, yet the weekly 9 EMA remains comfortably intact. Price is hugging the daily 9 EMA, and for a name that has run as hard as DELL has, this kind of quiet consolidation near the first support level is exactly what the scanner looks for before the next leg. Flagstar Bank has the most modest daily cooling of the three, so the pullback is shallow, but the weekly trend is holding and the daily 9 EMA is providing near-term support. The scanner is watching this one for continued tight action near that level, with any expansion in selling volume being the signal to reassess whether this is a true dip or something more. These are patience plays, names showing early exhaustion after a prolonged sell-off, not confirmed bottoms. Uranium Energy has been in a bear streak of six consecutive weeks under the Gann high-low cloud, which is the kind of seller exhaustion the scanner looks for, and the ADX is declining, meaning the downtrend is losing its momentum. The stock has reclaimed its daily 9 EMA, which is the first structural sign that buyers are beginning to step in. The sentiment on this name sits in fear, which is the washed out confluence the scanner wants to see alongside the structural signals, but the framing here is stalking a potential turn, not calling a bottom. Worth a watch. Critical Metals mirrors that same setup almost exactly. 6 weekly bar bear streak under the Gann high-low activator, falling ADX, daily 9 EMA reclaimed, and volume drying up on the most recent bars, which is actually an additional layer of confirmation that sellers are running out of urgency. The stock's own sentiment is in fear as well, giving the scanner the full checklist for an early exhaustion read. This is a watchlist name for patient traders who want to see a few more days of constructive action before committing. These are tickers the scanner is flagging as potential top signals. Sanmina Corporation is flagged for distribution, meaning the scanner is seeing institutional selling pressure while this stock sits near its 52-week highs with its own sentiment deep in extreme greed. This is not a definite short call. This is a risk management signal for anyone already holding a long position. The scanner suggests this is the kind of environment where trimming size and tightening trailing stops make sense, because smart money quietly handing off inventory near highs is how many tops form before anyone notices. Cadence Design Systems is showing the same distribution pattern at similar sentiment extremes near its own 52-week highs. Short interest on this name is very low, which means there's not a large built-in short squeeze catalyst working against a fade thesis, but this is still a distribution flag, not an active short signal. For existing longs, the scanner is waving a caution flag here, and the setup would call for reviewing where stops are sitting relative to recent highs. All right, that is the full scan for today. Thanks for watching, and as always, nothing in this video is financial advice. Do your own research before making any decisions with real money. If you have a ticker you want me to run through the scanner, drop it in the comments below. And if you found this useful, hit the like button and subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Catch you then.